Well, welcome. Hello, my name is Matt Fox, and I want to welcome everybody who's here on our MSP project management webinar with TopLeft. Glad that you're all here. Thanks for registering and joining. I see that we have people are still coming in, so welcome to everybody. Today we are going to talk about how you can get back control of your work, your project work in your MSP using some fairly basic techniques, Kanban especially, because you don't need more complication. You don't need a huge framework for doing your project work. You need something simple. If this is the first time with us, then you may not know that TopLeft is actually a unit of an MSP. Okay, so we are part of Kerkhoff Technologies. That's an MSP in the Vancouver, Canada area since about 2007, so fairly established. And we had a lot of these. We had problems with our project management. Okay, so what we're going to be showing you here is stuff that we've learned. We've learned ourselves, how to manage projects well using simple practices. Because we don't have time to just go and learn the complicated stuff that's going to take a long time for the long term. So this stuff's going to be simple. So again, welcome. Let's hear where people are from. So find and yeah, we'll do a little tech check here. We're going to be using the chat feature for a few times here. So find the chat feature of the Zoom webinar and type in your name and your company and where you're from. Let's find out find out who's here. While you're doing that, let me introduce myself a little bit more. Again, the name is Matt, and I go by the title of VP of TopLeft. I just kind of coordinate everything here. Came up doing some software development, a bunch of project management stuff as well. I've been with Kerkhoff Tech and some associated companies for more than 10 years now. And yeah, I teach people the techniques. You'll find me on the training sessions that we offer. Some of the special paid training that I'm going to mention later, and also coordinate, our sales and marketing and software development and so on. So definitely, I'm happy here to help you and teach you about the project management. Okay, so let's see. Appreciate everybody who typed in there. We got somebody from Windsor, Ontario. Suzanne, welcome. Jared from New Zealand. Great. Is it like midnight there? Maybe not that early. Anyway, welcome. Benjamin from Calgary, not that far away. Welcome. Michael from Sidle Systems. Welcome. Jose in Costa Mesa. Michael from Albright, Port Angeles. Oh, that's just across the way, actually. I'm not actually in Vancouver. I'm in near Victoria in British Columbia. Okay, so I can kind of see Port Angeles just across the strait there sometimes. We got Mike from also from New Zealand. Oh, he added a few things. We're a current TopLeft user and love it for our ticketing and looking strategies for simplifying projects. And it's only 7 a.m. there. Okay, that's not too bad. Daniel from Kerkhoff, welcome. Yeah, great, very good. And I see that there's more people joining. So if you've come in the last couple of minutes, welcome. Feel free to toss your name and your location there in the chat. Okay, let's get started. This is Kerkhoff Tech. Or actually, this is kind of an old picture. As you can imagine, we haven't actually all been together in a while. But I believe, yeah, we've grown even since that picture was taken. So let me explain a little bit, like, why did we go, like, as an MSP, why did we go and build out this, these techniques, and like, why did we build out this software? Because our project management was, it was not great. That's kind of putting it nicely. So here, we had, like, for example, too many tickets started but not finished. In particular, like, we had 400 open tickets when we had 10 technicians. 40 per tech. That's way too many. Our projects didn't progress. Okay, things were moving, and we didn't even really know what was close to being complete. The tickets that were, it took a long time to close tickets. Okay, our customers felt neglected. Everybody was siloed, because they had such a big load on them. They were not eager to help their teammates because they had such a big load on themselves. And things were just taking too long because of our PSA software was just slow. It was not very friendly. We were ConnectWise users, and we help a lot of ConnectWise users. Also Autotask. Autotask and ConnectWise actually, they're pretty much the same as far as project management goes. So I mentioned a few of the problems there. Put it back in the chat. What's your biggest problem? Like, what are you frustrated about here? You're giving me an hour of your time for some reason. Give me just a couple words. Doesn't have to be a paragraph or an essay. Just a couple words. What's the biggest problem with project management there at your MSP? Probably you're not alone. Okay, while you're doing that, let me explain. How did we end up with Kanban? Well, we had done some software development. That was one of the things that we did at our MSP. And Kanban practices and agile practices had come up in the software development industry. It was more well known there, and so we're familiar with them. And like, would these practices work for the the MSP and the project side? Well, turns out they do. So that's why we built that out. We made really major improvements. Our project management is, we're happy with that now, much better. Of course, it's not perfect. We're always growing, but we're so much more successful using these practices that I'm going to explain here. Okay, so what are people saying? Jose says, Autotask, not project friendly. Yeah, you feel like you spend more time clicking around and not getting your questions answered. Yeah. Michael says, visualizing work across multiple projects. Yes, totally know what you mean. But ConnectWise and Autotask, both, they don't give you a way to see the details of more than one project at once. Okay. Daniel says, being able to follow up on text time usage on the projects without micromanaging all their tickets. Yeah, big problem. Benjamin, assigning tasks to the technicians. Yeah, it takes way too many clicks to do that if you're just in ConnectWise or Autotask. Okay, so why did we choose Autotask? Why did we choose Kanban? I explained a couple reasons already, and also, like, what is it? Well, if you've heard of Kanban, you may be just kind of thinking about this sort of board here. You got your columns left to right, kind of indicates the stage of the work. Each of those little boxes there represents a card. It makes basically one item of work, and it'll start out on the left, it'll move to the right as it progresses through your pipeline of work. The faster things go, the higher your velocity. That's what you want to see, things moving faster. Okay, this is not all of what Kanban is. It's not just the boards. Okay, so there's a few things. There's more to it than just the boards. It's actually not new. Okay, I know a lot of you may not have heard of it until recently, but actually the ideas do go way back to the 1940s. Actually, they kind of started in Toyota automobile manufacturing. So it's actually not a new set of ideas. It has to do with efficiency, also reducing waste, and representing work visually, which is what that board is about. It's becoming more well known. Like you may have heard of Trello. Atlassian bought them. Trello is a Kanban board software. That's basically all they do, or at least it used to be all that they do. They do more now. But Atlassian bought them for more than $400 million. Like, that's a big deal. Asana, another project management software, they have Kanban boards. They went public a bit more than a year ago. So it's not just from software, right? This is because a lot of people in a lot of industries are adopting this sort of stuff. Okay, so what are the benefits here? Being able to see the work in progress, meaning stuff that you've started and haven't finished yet, and especially being able to limit that so that you don't get too much of it, because that's one of the main things that will slow you down. And you need the boards to be able to see that, the Kanban boards. Okay, so that lets you be more responsive. When you don't have a lot of work in progress, you can change directions and when things come up, and make sure that your customers stay happy, because you don't have 40 things per technician already started like we did. Okay, you can stop work from falling through the cracks, because you can see the problem work, rather you can see it right in front of you instead of having to go and search for it here and there in your PSA. You can improve the flow of work by identifying the bottlenecks and then once you identify them, then you can fix them. It helps you just, all of those things help you and your team stop feeling overwhelmed. You can use it as a good communications tool because everybody looks at the same boards. Everybody gets the exact same picture of what's going on. And also, it's not something that you gotta like totally throw away everything that you're doing and start over with Kanban. It's not like that. You can add Kanban boards to your current workflows and just get better visualizations, okay, without having to make huge changes to all of your workflows. Okay. What I'm going to show you here, it's specifically for MSP project managers. People who need practical steps and not just conceptual stuff. You know, maybe you've read some books about Kanban, which is very good, but sometimes that can leave you with more of an idea of the concepts rather than like, what concrete steps do I take today to actually start benefiting from this, okay? Because there's very little that's written about Kanban for MSPs, okay? So this is specific for MSPs. You know, it's typical MSP stuff. You know, you got 5 people working on 20 projects, or, you know, or a bigger team too. It's not going to be like, if you have huge projects, you know, you got like 20 people working on one project, this is probably not for you. And it's also not a complete methodology, meaning whatever you've learned about project management, if you got some sort of certification, you know about quality management, communications, risks and stuff. Okay, you keep that. Okay, we're not throwing that stuff away. We're not trying to do that. We're just trying to manage the work and how it flows. Okay, so everything you've learned, you get to keep that. And so this is a cycle. Okay, basically we needed something that was kind of easy to remember. So that's just kind of how it works. You as a project manager, you're going to go through a number of these steps and then you're going to start over. So the first one is you're going to identify the projects. You know, usually that's pretty simple because, you know, people have paid you for the projects, but there's some hidden ones. You don't want to miss those hidden ones. So I'll tell you about that. Next stage, you're going to look at those projects you have. You're going to break down that work into manageable chunks. Okay, then you're going to estimate it. Then you're going to get it assigned to the engineers, and then you monitor it, okay, just to see what's going well, what's not going well, and then you start over in the cycle. Okay, so first letter of those, I-B-E-A-M, says I-beam. There you go, picture of an I-beam. Just you know, every time you see that, remember how to manage projects according to TopLeft. Okay, so it's a cycle, right? So it's going to happen over and over. Now, what's the frequency of this cycle? You have 2 choices. Now, this is just, you know, the 2-minute version here. You're going to look at these, and there's definitely more learning that you can do about this, but I'll give you the 2-minute version here. There's 2 main choices. Okay, one is Scrum. That the main thing there is that you have sprints. Okay, if a sprint is just a fixed period of time, typically 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. And so you would do this cycle once per sprint. You would choose this for more predictability, okay? Because you get kind of basically a fixed amount of work, you kind of plan it, and then you execute it and monitor it and so on. You do this for more predictability, both for your team of engineers and for your customers. Because you can kind of talk in terms of, okay, can we do this in the next 2 weeks? No, okay, well then it can be the sprint after that, okay? And everybody, it's easy to understand then. Kanban's a bit different. Kanban does not have a concept of sprints. Kanban, you're just doing a little bit continually as you need to, basically. So it's really taken like lean and agile techniques to the max in that you just do stuff as you need to. And you do that for more flexibility because you're not making any commitments to saying, okay, yeah, we expect to do this in this sprint and that, you know, this work in the next one. It's just totally flexible. If something comes up that's obviously really important, you can slot that in right away. It can go right to the top of the list. I'll show you how you can actually represent that coming up. So basically, those are the two your 2 main choices about that. Okay, so let's get into the stages of this framework now. First of all, okay, you identify the projects. Okay, a project is anything that's driven by you. Okay, you do some planning around it because you're the expert. Okay, and it's not driven by the client. Mainly kind of contrasting it with help desk work, where, you know, the client drives that. They say, oh, you know what, I couldn't log in this morning. Okay, I need help now. The project work is different because you get to plan around that. Projects is going to have multiple tasks. probably multiple engineers, and definitely, hopefully, you've got a clear scope and schedule agreement with the client. If you don't, then some of this can help with that, but definitely that's kind of going to be an important thing to work on. And I'll show you some of those things, like how to get a clear scope. So now here's the thing. You do want to include internal projects. Basically anything that your project engineers are working on, you need to be tracking that, because you don't want to end up in the situation where you've only been tracking the customer projects because you get paid for them. They're easy to identify, but it turns out, maybe like a third of your engineer's time is taken up by a whole bunch of internal stuff. Like some MSPs are really big on building out certain services. They offer these services as a product. But that takes a big amount of time sometimes. So that needs to be tracked. Okay, so don't forget about that. And it might not be a kind of a one-time project. It could be both. Okay, it could be like a one-time project, like RMM migration. Okay, that you migrate it, then you're done. Or it could be just constantly improving your products and services and stuff. Either case, don't forget about it, because you don't want to get tricked into thinking that your engineers, you're looking at all your work when actually you're not. That's a big risk, so avoid that. So how can Kanban help here? And I'm gonna, like later, I'll tell you about our software. But just in these terms, I'm gonna tell you what you can do even without the software, right? You can do this on a wall with, you take some tape to make the lines for the columns, and you take your sticky notes, okay? And you write the names of the work on there, okay? So this does not have to be fancy. It does not have to use technology. How you would start here is actually, at this point, you make what's called a swim lane, okay? It's just a horizontal group, basically, okay? So you make one for each project. So here we have an example, CRM implementation for somebody, email migration, okay? So 2 projects. You're gonna have more probably, but this gives you the idea. And that's it, actually. That's all you gotta do for the identify project stage. So it doesn't even look like a Kanban board yet, but that's coming. The next stage here is you break down the work, okay? This is where you make the tickets and tasks that describe the work, okay? So how much do you actually have to break up the work right now? You don't want to do too much, but you don't want to do not enough, okay? Here's what I would say, okay? Figure out your next milestone, okay? So what's a kind of a big section of work, something that the customer would get a lot of value out of. That's your next milestone, basically, or your phase. Break up the work for all of the next phase, okay? You don't want to do a whole project milestone at a time. You don't need to do the entire project if it's a big project that has more than one phase. That's not very agile, meaning you could plan out the whole thing, say 3 or 4 phases of work, but you get through the first one and it took you twice as long as you expected, and you're like, well, we can't do maybe the project's just, it's over then, like they cancel it, or you can't do the work at the end because you used up all the budget or whatever. Then you've wasted all that planning work, okay? So that's why you don't need to do that. Just do this stuff one milestone at a time. And the reason is that doing it one milestone at a time helps you to not miss anything, okay? Because that's one of the biggest risks, is that you miss stuff. That's what blows your budget. And doing it in one section like that helps you not miss that. Okay, so important question, who's going to do this? It's got to be somebody familiar with the tech issues at a fairly detailed level. So an engineer is going to do it, or if you're a project manager who's come up from engineering experience, then yeah, absolutely, you can do that. That's definitely a benefit here. The project manager doesn't have to do it. He's just responsible for making sure it gets done. So now I'm actually going to talk about what fields you're going to use, okay, so to help you avoid wasting any work. Okay, so if maybe this doesn't apply if you are just going to use the ticket fields, but I know that you guys are using ConnectWise or Autotask or whatever, so you're going to be putting this work in there. So what fields do you actually use? Set the summary and the title, okay, obviously. The description and the tasks in that work in each ticket. Go ahead and do that, because that's where you got the scope, so that's important. The due date, go ahead and set that only if there's a constraint, like an external constraint, you know, like maybe this has to do with a conference that's on a certain day, or it's a regulatory due date, you know, for some new constraints coming in. Basically, it's not just for managing work. Okay, I'm going to tell you other ways to manage the work. We don't do that with the due date, but if there is an important constraint imposed from outside, then you're going to want to reflect that in the due date. Priority, probably don't mess with that. Almost everything is a normal priority in project work like this. And go ahead and set any other fields that you're actually going to use, meaning like type, subtype, item, just other configurations if you need that, things like that. If you're actually going to make use of them, then go ahead and set them. If you're not, if you don't actually have a use for that, then don't bother. That's just waste. Okay, now here's some fields that you don't set. Let me save you some work. You're not going to set the due date. I know that your PSA has a field for setting the due date. Don't do that. That's push, meaning that's opposed to Kanban, where you set up the work and then you let the engineers pull it as they're ready. Okay, you don't push the work to them by setting a start date and then telling them when they got to start. You don't set the duration. Okay, that's kind of another variation on push. Don't set the budget or estimate story points, stuff like that. That comes later, and don't assign it to anybody. We'll do that later. Talking about the ticket size. Okay, this is where a lot of people don't really know how to do this very well. They end up with, generally people end up with tickets that are too big. Although from time to time you can see ones that are too small. A ticket ideally should be a cohesive unit of value and minimize the dependencies. Okay, so you should be able to deliver a ticket and then be able to tell the customer pretty clearly, okay, now this bit of work is done. Doesn't mean the whole milestone is done. The project's not done, but ideally they've got something that they can look at and say, okay, we're moving ahead. This is getting closer. So as an example, maybe you're upgrading somebody's network. Okay, you don't make a ticket call install new office router. That's too big. Okay, we don't get it. We can't look at that and say, I know anything useful about what stage that's actually in, or like when it's going to be done. Okay, so that one you'd probably want to split up into maybe three. I'll just kind of as an example. You're going to order. You got to order it. Then you got to configure the router. Kind of thinking in terms of it. It comes to your office. You configure it. And that's one unit of work, and then you actually go out and you replace it at the customer site. Okay, so that's another unit of work. So that's probably like 3 tickets, just as a idea. Ideally, a technician can do it in one sitting. Okay, I know that's definitely very ideal. It's certainly not always possible to do that, but if you can do that, that's great. The technician can just pick it up from the waiting column, which I'll get to. They do the work, and then it's complete. Okay, it's not something that stays open for a long, long time. If you know in advance that the work requires some sort of handoff, like between one engineer who's an expert on this and another engineer who's the expert on something else, try to avoid making that one ticket. Okay, that sort of thing. Try to make that 2 tickets if you know it's going to involve a handoff like that. That's not including if you have something like a review stage where somebody does some work and then another technician takes a look at that to verify that. That doesn't apply. That's a great case for making columns on your Kanban board that represent that stage where it moves from one, from the in progress to a QA sort of stage. When in doubt, make a ticket smaller. Okay, like I said, most people have a problem with making tickets too big. If you find out that you're just doing a bunch of clicking around because you do have too many tickets, it just doesn't seem like it's providing any value. Certainly that can happen, and then go ahead and combine them. That's a less common problem though. Definitely at most 2 days of work. Okay, I would say keep to this very strictly. The only exception is if you're doing something that's really experimental, meaning you don't know if it's some work, you don't even really know if you're going to succeed or not. And you really don't know how long it's going to take. You really can't even say much about the scope. All you know is that you need some result. You don't know even how you're going to get there. Okay, that's the only exception. Now, how to make it very clear, okay? Because misunderstanding the scope of the work between project manager and the engineer who does it and the customer, that's a big problem. You want to avoid that. Especially you want to be able to understand when it's done, okay? So that you don't get to the state where an engineer thought they were done, but actually they only did half of it according to the understanding of the project manager. Or they've done way too much. They did twice as much as what the project manager expected them to do. Big problems. Okay, so what we ended up doing is, we found ourselves kind of talking in a team, in a meeting, saying, okay, when is it done? And then again, like, is it really done? When someone, someone might ask, hey, is this ticket done? And then the engineer responds, well, yeah, it's done. Except for this one thing, right? So that's kind of, you want to avoid that. So we started talking in terms like, when is this done? And then we just explicitly said it. It's done when, and then we make a checklist of items. It could be as little as one item if it's a small ticket, probably not more than 10 items. Okay, but the point is, if it's a checklist, very explicit, that helps keep everybody on the same page about that. Okay, so how do we use Kanban for this? Okay, we started out with our swim lanes, the horizontal groups there, and now we just we've broken down the work. So each little yellow box there is like a sticky note. Put it in a column called backlog. This is the work that you know you need to do. We're not saying anything about how it's going to be done yet, but at least it's written out. The ordering is important here. Okay, so if these are from top to bottom, first ticket, second, third, fourth, fifth, that ordering is important. That's kind of the ordering that you as a project manager know they need to be done. They're not just tossed all in here in no order at all. So we're going to kind of work from the top because those are the most important ones. Okay, so now we get to the next stage where we estimate it. Okay, so this is where you enter your budget hours. You just make an educated guess about the number of hours on that. You can do story points as well. So what is a story point? Yeah, so a story point is it's a different way of measuring the how big the ticket is. So instead of measuring the hours, you measure its complexity relative to the other work that you're doing. Some people, it comes out of Scrum methodology. Okay, so any book about Scrum is going to cover something like cover this stuff. The main a story point is just a number. There's a few different ways to do it, but usually just some number, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. That's Fibonacci sequence. Some people recommend that. And the advantage is that usually the whole team can agree on a measure of complexity, where the number of hours really depends on who's doing the work. Okay, so a junior engineer is going to take way longer to do certain work than a senior engineer. Okay, so who does the work is going to have an effect on who the estimate. Okay, story points avoids that problem. I would not recommend you start with story points right away. That would be something I would recommend you add later if you want to refine your process. I would say at the beginning, just keep it simple. Go ahead and measure in hours. Usually it's good enough. How much of this do you actually need to estimate? Just same thing. With Scrum, you're going to do you're going to do one future sprint's worth. Okay, there's no point in doing any more than that. Kanban, you just got to do enough to keep the queues from getting empty. Okay, so if you find that your engineers look like they're going to run out of work soon, okay, then you as a project manager have more work to do to make sure that those queues don't get empty. Now, again, who does it? Well, same thing, same answer as last time. Someone, the team or the individual, somebody who could do the work, someone coming from the engineering background who's going to be able to get a reasonable estimate there. Okay, they got to be familiar with the project and the technology. So if you are an manager who comes from an engineering background, go ahead and do it yourself. If not, just assign it to your engineers to do. Now, you may be asking, well, like, why would we separate this from the breakdown stage? Okay, doesn't this seem pretty similar? Well, it kind of is, but the point is that it delays, well, kind of two benefits of waiting a little bit on this. It delays until the scope changes are likely done, meaning like your engineers are working on parts of the they're working on other parts of the project, and some of the work that they are doing can inform your estimates, okay? Because they might find, we did this work and it was twice as much as we thought, okay? So if you've kind of delayed your estimation, then the things that your engineers learn can inform your estimates if you wait. Okay, if you don't wait, you do all at the beginning, then you're going to have to go back and redo that and waste some work. Okay, so that's a reason to wait. Again, if you find out that you've made tickets that are 2 days or more, that's too big. Break it down further. Okay, so what's that going to look like in Kanban? We're going to move the work that needs estimation. We're going to move that from the backlog to the needs estimation column. And then when we actually do that, meaning, as a project manager, you get some time to actually estimate that, or you hook in an engineer to do it, or the whole team, depending on how you want to do that. Once it gets done, then you pull it over here. You write the number on it, either hours or story points, and you pop it into the ready column. Ready meaning, okay, now we're ready for an engineer to actually work on this stuff. That brings us to the fourth stage here, assign the work. Okay, so this is the trigger that makes it actually get done. You're putting it into a queue for somebody to work on it. Now, one of the biggest blocks to the smooth flow of the work is the bottlenecks, okay, where certain work depends on certain team members. Okay, so maybe as an example, you have only one senior engineer who needs to be consulted on like half of your tickets. Okay, this is going to lead to fairly long queues for certain types of work. So any of that work that has to go, what you'd find then is that any work that doesn't have to go through that engineer is going to go really fast because just anybody can do it. But all the work that has to go through that engineer, it could be half of your work. All of that's going to get really delayed, okay? Because your engineer certainly, if you're like any other MSP that we've seen, your engineer is busy with his or her own work, right? But if he's got to go and if most of the team's work is that person's work, it just slows down. Okay, so you got to be able to minimize those constraints. Which we'll get to more later. But yeah, basically you need to use this information to consider who you're going to assign it to. Okay, so if you're approaching thinking about which tickets to assign, you think about how does this project actually fit together? What work needs to be done first? Also, considering multiple projects, because you're an MSP, so you're doing multiple projects at once. Does any one of these projects have a due date that's coming up sooner compared to the other ones? Okay, that's work that you need to prioritize over the other projects. Also just the size of the project and how important it is. Okay, so those are what you're going to consider as you decide which work you need to assign. And then who to assign it to. Okay, basically, your technician, your engineer, who's familiar with what technology. Also, who's familiar with which clients and which projects and whatnot. That's going to affect who you can assign those tickets to. Also, their current load, like I mentioned, if you do have a senior engineer who's got a lot of the work, then you're going to have to assign it to somebody else, hopefully. And then just general availability, like in either non-project work, trainings and vacations and so on. Hopefully, for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, you're getting into summer, so hopefully you're thinking about that already with your project stuff. Now, let me mention kind of an advanced technique, which is you don't actually do all of this step. You don't actually assign it to a particular engineer. This technique is to just make one queue of work. You just kind of pop it in. You prioritize it as the project manager, so you put it in what order you want this work to be done, but you don't actually assign it. And you can do this if you don't have too many constraints in your team. Like basically anybody in your team can take any ticket because you've done a lot of effort in making sure that everybody's trained up, not just in certain technologies, but in different clients as well. Everybody's familiar with every client. So if you've done that sort of work to minimize those constraints, then you can do this technique and just make one queue of work. And then the engineers just, when they're ready for new work, they just go to that one queue and they take whatever's on the top. That can save you a lot of work. in the long run by not having to do this this estimation. Now, we say more about this technique in our service webinars, so I'd expect to do one of those next month. And yeah, so that's a pretty powerful technique. And if you come to the service webinar, then we'll talk more about that. Okay, so back to Kanban. Notice I've kind of erased what we've done before, because here in this phase, we switch around the swim lanes. Notice those are not the project swim lanes anymore. These are the technician swim lanes. We've got Terry and Nicole as examples. Okay, so you take you as the manager, you take the work off of the project swim lane and you pull it over onto these engineers swim lane and you pop it in a ready column for the engineer. And then, Terry can easily see the stuff that's in his queue. Nicole can easily see the stuff that's in her queue, and you prioritize it. Okay, so again, this isn't just a bucket of tickets that they pick from on their own. These are ordered, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, because you as a project manager need that sort of control to make sure that the important stuff is getting done and not just getting delayed there. Okay, that brings us to the final stage here, where you monitor the work. Okay, so this is where the engineers begin, working their magic. They take from ready as they basically, they'll finish a ticket, then they'll go back to the ready column. They'll see what's there. They take from the top and start working on that. I will explain a little bit more how you'd manage that in just a moment. This is not really like the other phases in the cycle where you do it and you move on to the next one immediately. You can do it as fast as you can. Here you kind of sit in this cycle for this part of the cycle for a while. Not that you're certainly not that this takes a lot of work to do. Our whole point is to try to make this part simple, but monitoring, you need to do a little bit all the time. So it's actually the majority of the cycle. What you really want to do is manage by exception. Okay, so you want to be monitoring this work. It's not your job to do any extra work to kind of push this stuff forward, right? Like I've already explained all of your responsibility in setting up this work to be ready to do. It doesn't need anything else, but you do need to be aware of the exceptions. Okay, so you're going to be managing by exception. Here's some examples. The due date versus the progress on the ticket. Okay, so if a ticket is already overdue, you want to know about that. You got to, whatever happened there, you got to work on that to fix that. Or if it's getting close to being due and you're not seeing the progress that it needs, then you want to be aware of that. You want to be looking at the hours logged on those tickets versus the budget. Okay, so that kind of refers to one of you mentioned having trouble with that, understanding like how much work is actually happening on these tickets. Things that have been basically things that are kind of getting stale. They're not moving forward. I think they've been sitting a long time in one of these columns on your Kanban board. The different columns, I'll get to the specifics in just a second here, but things can sit in the different columns for a variety of different times before it's a problem. Like one column, things need to move forward fairly quickly from there. Other ones, it's okay if they sit there for a little while. It's not a concern until it's been there for even longer. It's kind of the same thing if it's been a long time without a time entry or a note. You want to be also looking for bottlenecks, like the typical MSP one where you a half of your work or a third of your work is going through one engineer. You want to be aware of that. And then things that are escalated from the engineers. Okay, you need to be aware of that, so you can work together to move that stuff forward. Okay, so some of the resolutions here. If you see a problem, maybe you need to reassign that work to a new engineer. Okay, pretty typical for the if there's a bottleneck on one of your engineers, try to reassign that work to to somebody else. It's sort of same thing. If you see a bottleneck, especially, suspend new assignments to that engineer. Just say, okay, I'm not giving you any extra work till you work down all these tickets that you have. You can split up a ticket sometimes. So if you initially made a ticket too big and you're like, this ticket's going to sit here for a long time, and I'm not going to be able to see the details of what's happening in this ticket so I can report it back to the customer or manage other things, because the ticket was initially too big, then anywhere in the cycle, go ahead and split up that ticket. Okay, there's no reason that you need to keep that ticket the same size, even once an engineer has started on it, you can go and say, you know what, this ticket was too big. We're going to move this chunk of work to its own ticket. Sometimes, if you're lucky, that means that one of those tickets is already done, okay? Because you split it, maybe you split it into the work that's not done yet and the work that's already done, and of course, then you have one ticket that you can move all the way to completed. Sometimes you just got to cancel it, okay? Yeah, we know that sometimes sometimes work just takes a long time. Sometimes it's wait because you're waiting on the customer, but whatever reason, it gets to the point where there's no more business case. You actually don't need this anymore. So go ahead and cancel that. Sometimes a client ghosts you. Not a whole lot you can do about that. And then you just got to say, you know what, okay, we're canceling that because we didn't hear from you. You must be busy. That's okay. You let us know if you want to do that work in the future. But for now, you know, basically you're saying it's not our responsibility anymore. We're just going to close that off. Okay, so let's look again on the Kanban, how to use Kanban here. So this is where the engineers start using this. Now, they're going to do a lot of the moving, well, or basically all of the moving the tickets around on this particular Kanban board. Okay, so what they do, you know, basically they take work off of ready, put it over into started, or you know, frequently this is called in progress. That's where they work on it until they're done with it. They ideally it only moves ever to the right. You know, maybe you got a QA, maybe you got acceptance. You know, certainly these are not mandatory. This is just an example. Maybe just move straight to completed. Anyway, you know, they see it moving towards the right. If they need to get more information on the ticket, you know, maybe they need a question answered from the customer, then it goes back into waiting because it's waiting on the customer. Or if it is a ticket where they got to go on site, for example, you know, you're going to coordinate a time to go on site, and you pop it there into scheduled. Now, that's what the engineers do. I have a little bit more to say about that in a moment. But what you're doing as a project manager here is you're watching for the exceptions and you're marking the exceptions somehow. So see, I've got, you know, a red indicator here, orange, and here, yeah, orange indicator here. Those are marking the problem tickets that need extra attention from the whole team. Okay, basically you're saying that something's not right here. Let's work together to get these back on track, because they're going to start causing problems for the customers. Either, you know, maybe it's been sitting here too long, maybe it's over budget, maybe it's overdue, those things that I mentioned. And just indicating them there gives you, you know, a way to visualize that all together as the team. Now, notice I said there's no part of this cycle where you schedule to the calendar, okay? So you're not putting tickets into the members' calendars, and this is definitely the biggest change between maybe what you've heard from, you know, ConnectWise teaching, or you know, a lot of folks are putting work into the members' calendars as a way of managing it and making sure it gets done. That's very, very fragile. Okay, again, this is one of the things that we talk more about in the service webinars. But basically, Kanban gives you sufficient control over the work so that you don't have to put it to the members' calendars anymore, unless it's tickets that need coordination. Okay, so for that sort of work, mainly like examples are you're going on site, or there's a scheduled outage. You know, you told the customer, hey, we're going to do this whatever outage at 9 o'clock at night, something like that. Okay, that's fine. That's coordination. Calendar is the right place to keep that work. If it doesn't need the coordination, which is pretty common for project work, after all, you're the one managing it. The customer doesn't need to care when you do it. Don't put that stuff into the calendars. Okay, the board is now where you manage that. Okay, so this does mean for your engineers, they do need to keep an eye on their calendars, because there's still going to be work to do in their calendars, the stuff that needs to be coordinated. Okay, so they're going to be looking at their calendars as well as the Kanban board. But the difference is, compared to when you're using the calendars to manage everything, you're like, then an engineer's day, like 90% of it is all scheduled up, right? But when you're doing this with Kanban boards, then maybe 10% of it is scheduled up, right? So they have substantial free time in their calendar, which of course isn't free. What they're doing is working from the Kanban boards. That's it, okay? IBEAM, identify, break down, you estimate, assign, and you monitor that work. Okay, so that's it for your role as the project manager. Now, a couple more details of just about how the engineers work from this, because I know that's a change for some people. In the engineer's swim lane, they're going to be working tickets from the farthest right side of the board, and then they work to the left. Okay, so when an engineer is in this frame of mind, they've just finished a ticket and they're like, what do I work on next? Compared to you as a project manager, you're kind of focusing on the work moving from left to right. The engineers, they're looking for work from right to left. Let's go back so I can show you that better. Okay, so basically, I mean, obviously they're not going to look at completed, but they'll look for work from the acceptance, if there is any, in this example. If there's nothing there, they look for QA. And then, okay, so there's something here in the QA column. Okay, so then, that would be Terry's first priority. Okay, and the reason is, the further it is towards the right side of the board, the closer that work is to being done. And what you really want to do is get that work that's almost done, get it all the way done, okay? Because that's when you deliver the value to the customer, okay? The customers get no value at all out of a ticket that's 50% done, okay? So having a whole bunch of tickets that are 50% done, customers don't care about that. They want their tickets 100% done because they get all the value of the ticket at the moment that it is 100% done. Okay, so that's why, and this is how you do that, is by pulling the work that's already closest to being done, pulling that so that it's all the way done, or at least moving it one stage further. Okay, so that's why ideally an engineer would not actually pick any work out of the ready column unless there's nothing here that they nothing that's on the right side of the board that's for them to do. Basically, they wouldn't, if they've already got one ticket that they've started, they wouldn't go and pick from the ready column, okay? Because their first job is to knock this out, get that over to the next, completed, or at least, the next stage. That doesn't totally apply to the scheduled column, like they're excepted here. They don't apply to the scheduled and the waiting column so much, because scheduled stuff, when the next thing to do on that ticket is, it's in the calendar, and waiting means it's waiting on somebody else outside of the team. So there's really nothing for the engineer to do there other than just kind of monitor it to make sure it, that status is still accurate. Like the customer hasn't actually answered the question. When they do answer a question about it, then maybe it moves back into the next stage, because now it is something for the engineer to do. So I hope that's all clear. If it's not, go ahead and I will have time for questions later. And again, we go into more detail in this sort of stuff in the service webinar. Other than that, what the engineers are doing, they're just keeping tickets up to date in the PSA, pretty regular stuff. They're entering their time. They're moving the cards on the Kanban board to make sure that everything is accurate. Because if they're not even doing that, then nobody has an idea of what's really going on. They escalate tickets when they need to, standard stuff you're already doing, and they participate in the breakdown and the estimation. Okay, but beware. Oh, hang on, I missed something. Yeah, I wanted you let's see how you feel about this. So go back to your chat and put in what's the biggest aha for you. What's sort of the biggest thing where you thought, oh, yeah, that bit could help us. Okay, so just again, not a paragraph, just a couple of words. Toss that in the chat. I want to hear what's the useful part here. And if you're just sitting back and thinking, wow, that's all like kind of fire hose, it's going to take a while to to digest that, then just type in digest. It's going to take you a while. So type something in the chat there. Now, while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you the beware bit here. Your PSAs are not really good at helping you at any of this sort of stuff. Okay, if you're in your project management module, it's just a lot of clicks, right? And you're looking at your spinner, it's taking a while to load the data. They don't offer the visualizations of the data to help you understand. You got, as someone else mentioned already, there's no ability to see multiple projects at once. You're always in the mode of managing one project, in the software, but that's not the reality of your job as a project manager. No monitoring of, there's no monitoring of these bottlenecks or neglected work or overdue or whatever, unless you go out of your way to set up that sort of reporting. You could solve a lot of these problems by using some sort of third-party project management software, like Trello or Asana that I mentioned earlier, but you don't have time to enter all this stuff twice. You have to have all of your stuff in your PSA and in this third-party software, and then your engineers where do they enter their time? Like, you don't have time for that. So that's not a good solution either, despite that, it would solve some of these projects. Okay, so that is why we built TopLeft as as a ConnectWise MSP. That's why we built this out, okay? Because we could see that we needed better solutions, but we also don't have time to keep the data anywhere else. It gives you the best of everything. Kanban boards, okay, to do all this stuff that I've told you. Look at multiple projects at once, ticket level and the project level as well. You can identify these bottlenecks, you can identify the neglected work, and you don't waste time entering data twice, okay? Everything comes straight out of your PSA. And by the way, that means that you can start this today. If you sign up, you just give us access to your data. We can have it all displayed by the end of the day, right? Because you already have the data. It's in your PSA. We just got to display it in a new way. Okay, so these problems could be solved by, as an example, Mike says he could benefit from splitting the project into chunks of the right size. And other people have tickets. A couple of people need to spend time digesting that. That's good. Appreciate you saying that. That definitely not alone. We do have a, I hope you can see that we're trying to lay it out in a fairly simple way, but it is very different than what a lot of people have ever done before. Okay, so if you're digesting it, totally understand. Okay, back to the boards. Let me show you. Okay, compared to doing this on a wall with sticky notes, this is what it could look like. Okay, this data is all out of a PSA. This is what you can have if you're using ConnectWise or you're using Autotask. Here we've got the columns, backlog, needs estimation, ready, scheduled, and so on. Okay, you would look at this. Your project engineers would look at this. Everybody gets the same view of the data. This is just a basic Kanban board. What you'd actually do is probably set it up like this. Here's an example of the project swim lane ones. Okay, so each swim lane here is one project. So for example, we have our CRM implementation project here, and we can see easily the 5 tickets that are part of this project. One's already completed, a couple are started, ready, and needs estimation. Okay, so very, very simple. It's exactly what I showed you, but really straightforward. We can see, and here you can see the 3 different projects. I probably have more than 3 projects too. Okay, so what you can do here is you can drag and drop the tickets actually. So it's not just, this is not just a visualization in the software. This is, you can use this to accelerate a lot of your work. For example, you can drag work from needs estimation to ready. You can just drag that ticket over there and it will stay there. We'll actually, oh yeah, I should mention, these columns are mapped to the ticket statuses in your PSA. You probably have statuses like new, in progress, completed, and a bunch of others. And so this actually directly maps onto that stuff that you've already set up. Okay, so you drag it from needs estimation to ready. It's going to go and update that ticket status in your PSA to ready, and so that you're always looking at the same data, whether you're back in your PSA or you're here. You can one new thing, actually, we just introduced this a month ago or so. Like, you can actually do this, do the estimation stuff within the PSA now. That wasn't always possible, but now you can go and actually, if you click there in the menu, you can actually bring up a dialog that will allow you to set the estimated hours on that ticket. Okay, so very, very fast. And that's something new in about the last month or so, being able to edit more details about these tickets right from the software. Okay, so here's another example. Now we've shifted it from the project swim lane to the member swim lane, okay, so that you can see who on my team has a lot of work, or maybe doesn't have a lot of work. Maybe, you know, one of your juniors is kind of wondering what they should be doing. They don't have enough work because so much work is going to your senior engineers, something like that. You can also see here, as you can see at the top, a swim lane for tickets that aren't assigned to anybody, which is actually where the tickets would be in it, the backlog, needs estimation, and the ready stage, or part of the ready stage. As you do the assignment cycle, part of that cycle, then you would you could actually drag them down here. So you can actually do that from the boards that from the software here. You can actually drag the tickets from ready and pop them here into the swim lane, and it will go and assign that work in your PSA. Here's a variation. So we're back, you know, like this is showing the project swim lanes now, but we are filtering. What we're doing here is we've kind of done an additional filter on the board to show only work that's assigned to one member. Okay, so this is where maybe one of your engineers would look at a board like this, and this is how they would answer the question. Show me all the work that's assigned that I'm responsible for. It's stuff that's assigned to me, and I still want to show it by the project. Okay, so that would be this sort of view, and you can kind of flip that, kind of pivot that, and show you. So now we're back to the swim lanes by the member, but we're filtering it for only one project. Okay, and this would be kind of for you as a project manager to say, I do want to focus on one project for the moment. Show me who's working on it. So that would answer this question very effectively. By the way, okay, Trina, I see some questions coming in. That's good. I will get to those. You can also use you can either use chat or you can use the actual questions function here. Now, also it will identify this neglected work for you. Okay, so here, you know, a ticket that's been in progress for 5 days that's kind of exceeds a threshold that you are able to. You can set this to whatever you want, and so it says, okay, this has been here too long. Mark this in red. And that's totally automatic. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that for each individual ticket. It just finds them. Same thing here. We have a kind of a warning set up for some upcoming work. It's due in 1 day, and we want to know about that. So it's, again, exceeded a threshold that you set up to help you identify it. By the way, engineers will see all these warnings too, which means that they can take, they may not need you to remind them, hey, such and such ticket is kind of neglected. What's going on with that? Hopefully they'll just see that in the Kanban boards and they'll be like, ooh, I better deal with that. If I don't, my project manager is going to ask me about it. Okay, it saves everybody work. And this is an example here. This is a little bit different. This is one that's not showing the individual project tickets anymore. Yeah, each card, as we call it here, this represents a project. So this gives you a really good view. If you're this sort of MSP that's got 10, 20 or more projects, and you want to be able to track their overall status of the projects, then you can use this board, and we can see, hey, we got 3 projects in progress. We got 4 of them that are coming up, and so on. Also, yeah, you can do swim lanes on those project boards. Here's just one example showing you this is a swim lane by the estimated start date. Okay, so you can see got a couple starting in a week coming up, a couple supposedly starting the week after that. It just gives you a good ability to be able to visualize stuff and not have to dig so deeply to figure out these sorts of things, to answer these questions that you need to answer as a project manager. Same thing, you can identify these problem projects for you just by highlighting them there. Also, a little tip, you can, when you're in the project view, you can click on a little icon here and you can actually zoom in to see just the project tickets for that project, or just the tickets for that project. And just, various other things you can do to improve your efficiency. Okay, like it's just fewer clicks, everything's in front of you. You can show your project and service work together. Some of that stuff is just for ConnectWise. We're going to be making improvements to the Autotask side. Avoid miscommunication. Everybody sees the same data. Assign and unassigned members. Okay, that takes a lot of clicks in your PSA. Really, really simple. here in TopLeft. Dispatch to the calendar. If you need to do that, you can do that. Your engineers can enter their time. Okay, so because it's easy now, your engineers are actually going to hopefully be able to do it without making it wait all to the end of the week or whatever, just not doing it at all or whatever. Big problems there. So this makes it easier for them. You can do customize the card appearance in ConnectWise and other things that are happening for ConnectWise that we're going to add for Autotask. Now, here's something that one project manager said about it. For her, it turned project management from just staring at huge lists, impossible to prioritize, into easily digestible, visually compelling information. Okay, and there's, she said even more, but just a lot of success already with other project managers. Let me tell you here about something that we've just launched, okay? Because we're not just software, we also want to actually help you along with some of these practices. We recently launched the Completed Ticket Challenge. It's a 3-week boot camp for helping you to finish work before you start new work, okay? To avoid that case that I talked about that we had where, technicians had 40 open tickets, okay? That's no good. We want to help you avoid that case. So it's a training program, okay? You get 4 guides in your inbox each week. Text, instructions on what very specific steps to do over a period of 3 weeks to launch some of these practices. Okay, you also get videos. We have a weekly call as part of this project. Okay, with any of the other MSPs that are here doing that with us. With you during that time, and access to an online community. Here is an example of actual metrics from a MSP that did this. Okay, over the 3 weeks, they started out with 43 assigned tickets. By the end, they were down to 25 assigned tickets, and you can see the stalled tickets that they were monitoring there. That dropped quite a bit as well. Okay, so real results from this program. Here's what someone said about it. I wish the Completed Ticket Challenge existed when we first adopted Kanban. It's all the Kanban ticket workflow onboarding. You need to get started. You can sign up here at this link. Normally, we offer it for 199 bucks. Either whether you're a new customer or you're an existing customer who wants the training, 199 bucks. But for you, because you came today as a way to say thank you, you can save 150 bucks on that if you sign up either as a new customer or existing customer until July 9th. We're offering it for 49 bucks if you sign up for that by July 9th. So use this code here, webinar CTC 2106. And that will knock 150 bucks off for you there in the shopping cart, because we really value this. People are getting a lot of help. The folks who do this program are more successful than those who don't. And yeah, it's really valuable for helping you to knock out this, get more completed work. Okay, so that's it. Now for everybody, I do apologize. We've gone a little bit over the hour. If you had a question but you had to leave, I apologize. This is being recorded, so you are certainly welcome to send it to your colleagues. We'll send out an email tomorrow with a link to the recording. But yeah, so let's have some questions. So yeah, toss those into the chat or the question section, and let's see what people were asking about. Okay, so Trina had said she sees value. How do we make sure that the engineers complete the work with a hard deadline? I like the idea of visual for them to see what needs to be done on each project. Do the cards show clients, projects, or just the task info itself? Okay, so a couple questions there. Yeah, how do you make sure that the engineers are delivering on the stuff that has the hard deadlines? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the hard deadlines are those, the deadline is imposed from outside. Okay, it's not something that you're just kind of using as a way to manage the work. You don't need to do that anymore if you got the Kanban practices going. Yeah, okay, so this comes down to the monitoring. As I said, you as a project manager are going to be looking at the due date. and kind of where is the ticket in the pipeline. So let's say, for example, that there's a ticket that has a hard due date tomorrow. Okay, so using the example columns that I had set up, if it's a small ticket and it's in progress and it's due tomorrow, and by small I mean something for sure we can deliver it today, a couple hours of work, whatever. If it started today, that's not a problem. You're going to be able to deliver it by tomorrow. Or if it, maybe is in the QA column or in the acceptance column, if you have, kind of fancier practices like that, and it's due tomorrow, you can probably deliver that tomorrow. That's not a concern. But if it's a huge ticket, this is like the 2 days of work sort of ticket, and it's in progress and it's due tomorrow, that's a concern. Okay, so you want, because you're at risk of not delivering that because it's a big ticket and is not done yet. Same thing, if a ticket is due tomorrow and it's still in the ready column, it hasn't even started moving that far along, then again, that's a problem. That's the risk. That's the sort of ticket that you're at risk of not delivering on. Okay, so what do we do? That's where the monitoring comes in, where you set up the thresholds in the software to say, let's look at the due date, and if it's coming up within a certain period of time, and the ticket is still in that column, then we activate that kind of warning indicator on the ticket so that we know about it. Okay, and then that's what you're doing is you're in your monitoring phase of the cycle. That's the sort of thing that you're looking for. And if you get into that warning phase, then what you do is you say, hey team, this ticket has a hard due date. We have to deliver it tomorrow or in 3 days or whatever. And so that means maybe you identify, so and so's the expert, some engineer's the expert on that particular topic. You say, okay, you know what, you don't work on anything else. This is your only priority. Okay? And that's how you deal with that. She also had other questions about, do the cards show the client, project, just the task info itself? Yes, I didn't make, I did show some pictures there, but I didn't make a big deal about it. Yeah, those cards show all of that sort of information. Okay, so it's either, that is all gonna be either in the swim lane. So if you're grouping the ticket like that, it's gonna say it in the header of the swim lane, so you know exactly what project it is, what client it is, or it's gonna say it on the card, okay, and that's all configurable. Get on a demo if you want to see that. We'd be very happy to tell you. Are you entering data into the PSA or into TopLeft? The good news is you can do either, because it is the PSA is the source of truth. Anything that you enter into a ticket in TopLeft, whether you're in the form that's showing you these details like changing the title, or you're just dragging it back and forth between the different columns to change the status, or you're dragging it between the swim lanes to change who's assigned to it, stuff like that. Okay, all of that stuff immediately goes back to your PSA. So you can enter it in TopLeft, and it's going to still be true in ConnectWise or Autotask. So you can enter it wherever you want. Is there reporting that shows how many hours are in each status? Like, for example, the number of hours in ready by engineer? Yes. Again, that's one of the, didn't want to overwhelm you with all the details, but yeah, that is an option. You can summarize. Let me bring up a picture. I'll tell you where it goes. So let's say if you had a board like this, these options are disabled in this board just to keep things simple, but we can show you, like, summarize the total number of hours for each swim lane and each column. So like, say there wasn't a one ticket here, say there was 8 tickets here in Nicole's ready column, basically her queue of work, and you could see that it adds up to 20 hours of work. Okay, it will also show you how many hours are already logged on there. Okay, so that would that one would be probably more useful in the started column. So you could say, okay, you know what, actually we do have more than one ticket in here. It's not ideal, but that's what it is. And maybe Nicole has 5 tickets that she's started and hasn't finished yet. Okay, and on those tickets she's logged 8 hours of work, for example. Okay, so those are absolutely things that we can add up so that you get better intelligence on that. You can do it per column. You can do it it'll do it for the whole swim lane. And in fact, it'll do it for the whole board, all of the tickets there. So you get an idea, okay, yeah, we've got 400 hours of budgeted hours on all the work on our boards and whatnot. Of course, like 400 isn't good or bad, but you can use it to monitor your own work to say, okay, this is increasing, this is decreasing. We're 100 hours more than we were last month at this time, and things like that. Okay, so that was that's all the questions I see here now, and I'm taking you a little bit over time. So why don't we, if you have any questions, toss them in there real quick. Otherwise, we will get to, I'll let you get back to your day. Just kind of the next step for anybody who is looking to start with this, go up to our website. At the very top, there's a button, so that topleft.team. You'll see the link at the very top bar. It says get a demo, I think. Click there and you can register to see it. Talk to us. You'll talk to me or you talk to our salesman, Steven, and we'll get all of your questions answered and get you started with this. Okay, and again, thanks for attending the webinar, and the use webinar CTC 2106 for the to get $100 off your completed ticket challenge. Thanks again for attending. We hope you have a great day.